This is a Founding Media podcast. Welcome to another episode of Masters and Founders. This morning we have a very special guest, Gordy Quist with Band of Heathens. I really love this story and I can't wait to share it. So why don't we get started? Gordy, I'd like to start with the very beginning, following your passion. When did you know that you wanted to become a songwriter and singer?
Well, that's an interesting question because I think it hit me that I wanted to do this when I started trying to do something else.
Okay.
I had always been playing. I'd always played in bands, and started playing music at a young age, but didn't ever think of it as like, oh, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I played a bunch of sports growing up, and actually played sports in college, but always had a band, and it was kind of my outlet. And at one point, I ended up getting a real job for 1 year of my life. Mm-hmm. Had a kind of a straight job, and that was when I realized like I can't do this. And
you told me about this. Why don't you share what that job, what you did, and then how different it was than what you're doing now?
Well, I had a job offer with an investment bank, mm-hmm. Lehman Brothers, and out of college, and I actually deferred the job for a year and played in my band, and then the band broke up after about 6 months, and I sold my favorite guitar, went to Europe with that money for a couple of months with another guy in the band, and traveled around, and then thought like, okay, this is it. This is the end of fun, and time to go work. And I realized pretty quickly that that was not the life for me. And I think a lot of that came from just a love of music, but also the traveling that I did in the months before, and just seeing some of the world made me just realize like, hey, there's not only one path to life. And so yeah, I worked for 1 year as a financial analyst, and made a bunch of money, like more money than a 22 or 23-year-old probably should make. And but it was the kind of thing where you're sleeping under your desk, and crazy hours and a lot of stress. And the day that our bonus was supposed to hit, and the bonus was like, an insane amount of money relative to your salary even. And I was hitting refresh on my bank account, waiting for the money to hit. The day that it hit, I got up and I quit.
Wow.
And I moved to Austin within a month or two of that.
So really your journey, just you had to go taste that, but you already had tasted the traveling, and you tasted the music, and you tasted all that, and that was really what was the calling.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't quite know how to make a living out of it. I just was like, okay, I've got some money in the bank, and that the money was a great safety net for me. It paid for my first 2 solo records, and I definitely had this advantage where I wasn't struggling. It's weird. Like a lot of times the struggle of having no money, because I've been in that situation mm-hmm. too. A lot of times that struggle is like the driver, like for success. And then for me in that time period, it was like, I'm not going back to that. Right. I will do whatever to not have to go back to this life of, and it wasn't like a drive. I didn't care about money. I wasn't driven to like be a rock star or make a bunch of money in music. My only goal was do well enough that I can keep making art and not have to go back and do something else. And so, I kind of just like, I was like, all right, how much money do I need to make every month to break even, to not have to go back?
They say necessity is the mother of all invention. Yeah. So that need not to go back is even so important, because you'd already tasted that, and you're like, I don't want to be sleeping under my desk. I want to go do what my heart desires. And one of the things that you said a second ago I caught on was, you thought that the fun was over in that last trip you took, and then you did this for a year, and then you're just like, no, I got to go back and do some of the other stuff. So
yeah, and it was some of that was about in fun, on a more lighthearted note, but it was also just like following a voice inside that is, saying you're not meant to do this. Like this feels wrong for a reason. It's not who you are. And, it's funny when I quit that job, that was in summer of 2004. And, I think everybody there thought, oh, he's going to go do a passion thing for a few years. And I don't think anybody imagined that Lehman Brothers would be out of business and go bankrupt before my music career, which is kind of funny. I outlasted Lehman Brothers, but yeah, for me, it hasn't ever been this drive to like make tons of money. Right. And maybe that's because I had an opportunity. Had I just wanted in life to like make a ton of money, I had this path where I probably could have done that. But it just wasn't fulfilling to me. And so for me, it's always been about make great art and be around great people, enjoy what you're doing, and make enough to be able to keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, as you know, the show's about masters and founders, people who either found their own business or master a craft and just kind of pursue their passion. In a previous conversation, we talked about your first song. What was that thing that made you write the first song?
The first song, it's kind of embarrassing. I think the first songwriting experiment was sometime in high school over Thanksgiving break when a girl I had been going steady with for 2 weeks broke up with me. And I think I wrote a few songs that weekend and recorded them on a tape deck. But, you do the multi-tracking where you can record onto one tape and then you play that tape and play along with it onto another tape, and you can keep like ping-ponging back and forth and multi-track. But yeah, the songwriting, I had always, growing up as a kid, it was like guitar playing, and I sang as needed, singing backup in whatever garage band I was playing in. And then at some point kind of discovered, you can, writing your own music and how that feels to express yourself and to try to tell a story that means something to someone else as well. And at some point, I was in a band where the singer left, and I was like, well, who's going to sing? I was like, oh, I'll try singing. And so being the singer, I think, fed I had already been, writing songs, but being the voice, singing them in the band kind of drove that, well, I guess I need to write some more songs, so, but yeah, it's funny, like of all the things I do now, touring in a band, playing live, recording music for that band, for myself, producing records for other artists. I think the songwriting aspect of it is the thing that really spoke to me like early, that it's what I really love. And so now that's what kind of informs everything else I do. And when I'm producing a record for someone else, the first thing we do is dive in and spend weeks on the songs and making sure that they're, as strong as they can be, and that they're saying exactly what, the artist wants them to say.
How they were intended.
Yeah.
So as you know, our audience, the message we try to get out there is be able to follow your passion. Just do what universe is calling you to do. In your path, obviously it hasn't always been super easy. There's been challenges, but will you talk a little bit about some of the things that you did to kind of get started after that year and produce your 2 records, and then what kind of jobs did you have to hold to follow this passion, things like that?
Well, in the early days, I took a bunch of pride in trying to make enough money to not have to go get another job, which I think was kind of dumb at the time. Like looking back, it's like, there's enough time in the day to go, you can work a job, and then in the evening, and you may have to give up your social life or give up a lot of other things, but there is enough time to work multiple jobs. And I for me, like substitute teaching was one of the things I did early on, where it's cool because you're not committed to having to show up every day at a certain time. It's more like you wake up at 6 a.m. if you want to work. You sign in. At the time, the school district needed a bunch of subs. There were more empty jobs than there were substitute teachers. So I would go in and do that until 3 or 4 p.m. and then I'd have the whole rest of the day to work on music or go play gigs at night. And so obviously it's hard, and I think takes some of your creative energy sometimes when you're working another job, but it's just part of the deal. You know, it's like, I feel fortunate now that my other job besides touring in my band is I get to show up and work at a studio and still make art, which is great. But, it's harder and harder to make a living in music. I don't know that it's harder than it's ever been, but it's a unique time. It has been for the last decade or so with the change in music distribution. And I think that it's easier than it ever has been to make art and to make music, at least having access to studios. But, it's still hard work. It's hard to say something and have something to say and craft something that's special. That takes a lot of emotional energy and a lot of time that no one sees. It's very solitary. Yeah. But so, yeah, a lot of times you gotta have the other job that supports that or that makes it possible to be able to do that. But for me, the goal was always to have enough work going on to not have to do that. But which then that gets into a whole nother weird situation where you're taking music gigs that may not be good for your career, but you take them because they pay X amount of money. And so sometimes I think, well, it might be better to have a job where no one sees you, right. You're making your money, and you only do the music stuff that's good for your career. Yeah. And I've done all those things in the spectrum, yeah.
Tell me about the Band of Heathens. Let's fast forward a little bit and how you went from solo label and solo albums to a group and band.
Yeah, the Band of Heathens was a complete accident. When I moved to town in 2004, people said, "Hey, you got to go hang out at this club called Momo's. That's that's the place to hang. And if you can, try to get a weekly gig there." And so, just kind of went and hung out all the time, made some friends, eventually got booked on Wednesday nights. And Wednesday nights was a really cool night. This guy, Brian Keene, Colin Brooks, a guy named Steve Wiedemeyer, Wendy Colonna. There were a few different artists that were on this Wednesday night thing. And eventually when I got on there, I think because Steve maybe moved to Nashville, a slot opened up. And then eventually Ed Jurdy, who was the last of the Heathens crew to move to Austin, and then he got a slot. It became a group of 4 acts, one right after another, that had the same drummer, same bass player, played in 2 of the 4 bands. And we were all sitting in each other's sets. And so at some point, it's hey, why don't we just make this one jam or one band instead of 4 separate shows where pretty much the band stays the same, but the front man changes. Mm-hmm. So it morphed into this more collaborative thing, and then people started coming to see it. It was more fun, I think, for the audience to see that, the collaboration. Mm-hmm. And it was loose, there were no rehearsals, and there was a lot of tequila. And we called it the Good Time Supper Club. And more people started coming to see that than to see our solo sets. Wow. And we figured we were onto something. And at some point, the newspaper listed us as the Heathens. And we don't really know who planted that seed or who did that. We have some suspicions, but that name ended up sticking kind of accidentally, and eventually we started taking that show on the road on the weekends instead of doing our solo things or playing guitar in other people's bands. And here we are, 13 years later, the band is still going all over the world, still making records.
That's amazing stories. Last time we met for coffee, you were talking about some of the great experiences you've had through this, now following this passion, some of the things that people you've been able to meet and actually record with. You want to touch on that? Because I think that's fun.
Yeah, it's just crazy that this band that was an accident has the life that it's had. We've gotten to do some amazing things early on. We were asked to do an Austin City Limits TV show taping, which was an amazing highlight. We've gotten to play the Ryman and just really cool venues, a bunch of the big festivals. And then some very strange things have happened. Apparently Kid Rock found the band somehow, I think maybe from our Austin City Limits taping, and that turned into us kind of becoming friends. And he ended up, one time he came up to Ed and myself and he said, you know, I got to talk to you. I think I might have ripped off one of your songs. I was like, what? Okay. He's like, you know, check it out. I changed it, but if you like it, if you hate it, I'll kill it. I won't release it. But if you like it, I'll give you whatever you want in publishing. So, okay, let's hear this. And he took us back and showed us this demo, and sure enough, like the beginning of the song was like, it's our song. Mm-hmm. And then he totally rewrote the chorus. And it's an interesting song because when we were writing it, I kind of knew like the verse was like strong. I was like, oh, this is a good melody. We're onto something. And when Ed and I were writing the song together, we stumbled on this weird chorus idea. And we both liked it, but we knew it was weird. And I said, we had this conversation, like, if we do this, we're totally killing any chance of commercial radio, any success for this song, because this is too weird for that. Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, but I like it. And I was like, yeah, I like it too. So we recorded it that way. Well, Bob, or Kid Rock, heard it, and he had the same thought. He's like, man, the beginning of this song is really good, but this is just too weird. Like, what'd you guys do here? So he changed the chorus, and he changed when it got through the chorus, the last line and the title of the song is "Fuck Off and Die." Mm-hmm. And it's called FOAD, F-O-A-D is the way the song was recorded. And it's like, never would have imagined I'd be okay with someone taking one of my songs and turning it into a Kid Rock song called "Fuck Off and Die." Right. But it was fun, and he was a great guy, and the way he went about it was like kind of funny. And so he ended up inviting us up to Detroit, and we lived in his house for a week, and we were the band on about half of that record of his. And so we got to record with him, and which is, again, another like just a weird thing that I would never have pictured aligning. And one of those nights we get into an argument over Bob Seger and who played a slide solo on some Bob Seger track. And Bob Ritchie, Kid Rock, was like, well, I'll just ask him. So he texts Bob Seger. He's like, he just lives down the road. So he texts Bob Seger. He's like, who played the slide solo on this track? And he says the answer, and he solves the argument, Then Seger responds and says, hey, I got a new record done. I want to play it for you sometime. What are you doing? And Bob Ritchie looks at us and it's like, you guys want Seger to come over? Nice. It's like, yes. So Bob Seger came over that night, and it's the two Bobs sitting at the control room, and Seger had his new record, and he's like chain smoking, just like fist pumping, listening to his record and singing his record to us, and it was awesome. And then Bob says, you want to hear what we're working on? These are the Heathens, they're the band on this record, like, let me play you some tracks. So he plays them like 3 or 4 tracks, and Seger's digging it, and then it gets to the song that Ed and I had written together that Bob borrowed, and Seger starts flipping. I was like, this is the hit. And that's one of the most like rewarding things for me. It was like, because when you're writing, all you can go with is like your gut. Like, I think this is good. I like this, but you have no idea if anyone else is going to like it. Yep. You think but you really don't. And it felt good that like in the instant where like Seger heard that melody and those words, it resonated with him in the same way that we kind of felt. Mm-hmm. And then when it got to the chorus, he's like, oh, you fucked it up. You can't say fuck in the chorus. No one's going to play it on the radio. And then they get into an argument. And then the next day, Seger calls us like, I rewrote all the words. So there's 2 versions of the song. Wow. One's called Say Goodbye, and it's a co-write with myself and Ed, Bob Ritchie, Kid Rock, and Bob Seger. So I have a co-write with Bob Seger, which is really crazy, and Kid Rock on the same song. Yeah. And then there's the explicit lyrics version, which, anyway, the 2 different versions of the record. But so weird things have come from the Band of Heathens, things I never would have imagined.
Great experiences. We were talking about some of the things you're doing now. Obviously, you're in your own studio now, and you want to talk a little bit about what the studio means to you, and also what you're doing for the community with your teaching. Yeah,
it's really weird how this has come to be. Our dear friend George Reef, who produced a couple of the Band of Heathens records, he was kind of a mentor for us in the studio. we had done a handful of records here in his house, and he got sick about 1.5 years ago and passed away from cancer. And that was really tough. We were on tour in Europe when that happened, and he had been sick for a while, but then his passing happened fairly quickly and unexpectedly. Everyone was very hopeful that he was going to pull out of it, but when we got back from tour, a couple months went by, and I ended up getting an email from his brother about what they were doing with all of George's gear. And so at first I was like shocked nobody wanted to keep the studio together, and because it's such a great, it's got a great sound, and the gear is a really nice collection of gear that George put a lot of time into. So I kind of put together a plan to try to get all the gear and keep that alive. I couldn't, I thought I couldn't swing the house too, but I ended up having a friend come in and help me buy the house. And so we've been able to keep the Finishing School, which is the name of his studio that he had. We're keeping the Finishing School alive, and it's been just incredible, and something, again, I never would have imagined that I'd be here. But it feels good to keep kind of what he started going. For the Band of Heathens, it's great to have a home base for us to, just screw around and make stuff in our own place. And then it's been also very cool and rewarding to, I've spent the last decade on the road most of the time, and feeling kind of removed from the Austin scene just because we spend so much time on the road. And so it's been rewarding to consciously, get more plugged in, more tuned into what's going on. And I've had a lot of artists, come by and make records. And that's been really rewarding and fun because you get to wear a bunch of hats. You get to the songwriting hat, and you get to play on the records, and engineering is a whole nother, realm that I'm diving into, which has just been really fun. So yeah, it's weird how I'd always dreamed of having a studio, my own space, but I did not think it was anywhere, nearby.
It's funny how the universe works.
Yeah, it's funny. And it's funny too, the way my mind works and the drivers for me. It was never I want a studio, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. It's kind of just been do good work really hard. And along the way, little things happen that kind of, boost the profile of the band, or a song gets placed here. You make just enough money that the band, we don't all have to go get jobs and do something else. It just kind of keeps building. And now over, a little more than a decade with this band and doing this, doing music for much longer than that. But it's just kind of funny how it keeps building on what you did before. And I think I'm trying to stay focused on just hey, just do good work, be kind, and try to be helpful with other artists, and kind of open to collaborating and open to just helping people along the way, because we've had amazing people step in and be helpful with us. And so just trying to consciously go back or kind of get back into the Austin scene and it's great too. It's worked out with the band. We don't tour as much as we used to, so it's nice to be home.
I know last time we chatted, you were talking about being able to offer a place where people write more music. Is that still something that you're working on? Or?
Yeah, I've got a few ideas working that I haven't fully formed, but the writing process is a big thing that, and it's honestly, it's as much for me as it is for anyone else. I love the idea of structure and process. Songwriting is mystical and weird, and you can't really explain, this is how you do it, and then have a good song at the end of it. It's much more unpredictable. But I do think there's a little bit of is a numbers game, and in just doing a lot of it, and then also having process and goals, and those keep you from being lazy,
right,
and keeping the output up, and that that's hard for me. I've got 2 kids and my wife, and so when I'm not working, like in the studio or on the road. I want to be present with them at home. And so it's like I have to have dedicated time structured for writing to be able to like keep having that output. And I'm trying to think of ways to build that in where it's a community of writers committed. And there's a lot of that here in Austin. It's great actually how much there's little accountability groups for songwriting. But I'd love to integrate it into the studio and then be able to like have a group of people write a song every week or every month or whatever the deadline is, and then have a day where everyone comes in and cuts the song. I think it'd be cool. But
that structure is always nice. One of the things that you mentioned last time that I really stuck with me was that in the songs that you've written, all the songs that you've written in your career and before, you never knew which one would be the hit. It was not just like, oh, this one's going to be it, right? It's really a numbers game. You put the work in, and you put the work in, and as you're putting the work into every one of the songs, you're honing your skills. You're honing your skills. You're honing skills, and every once in a while, one pops and it really resonates with the audience and does really well. So, the statement you said to me was like, if you just put in the numbers and you continue to hone that skills, things will come out of that. Things will flourish out of that. So I thought that was really insightful for, anybody out there that's listening and wondering how do I make my own band? How do I make songs? How do I make a songwriter? I think that's really, really good advice on that aspect.
I think it even applies outside of music. I think with anything, it's like if you just put in the work, you're creating output that is going to, hopefully do good things for you, but you're also getting much better at your craft, whatever that may be. And so just over time, if you believe in that, process of doing the work and that it will compound on itself and, in the end pay off. I don't know. Hopefully that works.
Makes sense. There's a story I want you to share. We talked about your dad being a Top Gun pilot and you having to bring it to show and tell, or talk about that? I just think that's an interesting. Not that it has to do with what we're talking about.
Yeah. No, my parents are great. They're really supportive and always have been. And it's interesting now, being a father and a husband, and I travel a lot. Obviously with the band, which is a strain and difficult, but it's interesting. I kind of grew up with my dad being gone a lot too. He was a Navy fighter pilot. He flew F-14s, and at a certain point decided to get out of active duty and get into the reserves and go the airline route so he could be home more. When I was in second grade, he was invited to Myrriah, California, which is actually where I was born. But he got invited back to Top Gun, to the Naval Fighter Weapons School, to instruct. And I think this was maybe a year or two after the Top Gun movie came out. Yeah. It's like in the this is like 87 maybe when this happened. And I think that movie came out in 84, 85, maybe 86. But I was obsessed with the movie. Looking back, like, man, should I really have been watching that movie at that young age? But anyway, that was kind of our life. That was my dad's life, like doing that. And so he had to leave. I don't remember how long he was gone, maybe 6 weeks or a few months. I'm not sure. But he had to leave, go back to California. We were living in Houston. And I was telling all my friends about it. And my teacher called my mom and said, hey, we need to have a serious talk. Gordy's having a problem telling fibs. And so my mom was very concerned, and she went in and they had a talk, and she told her that, Gordy's been telling stories that his dad's at Top Gun, like the movie. And so my mom had the pleasure of telling her that that's actually where he is right now. It's not just a movie, it's a real thing. And so then for show and tell, I brought it, when he came back, I brought his plaque for show and tell to really, rubber nose in it. But,
that's so fun.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Well, last question I have for you is, what advice do you have for a young artist that's starting out? Everybody wants to, needs a mentor, kind of do the right thing, take the right path. So what would you say?
I mean, there are so many different pathways for music that it's hard to give singular advice other than just to like work hard and trust that diligence and that hard work will pay off, and know that like it comes at a cost too. Like the hard work means, especially if you're working a job during the day, it's like, all right, that means at night, like you don't get to go like have beers. Like you're going to sacrifice that to sit by yourself and try to create something or get better at your instrument. And so, yeah, I just think the thing that I still have to tell myself is like, all right, do the work and then trust that it will pay off.
Trust is so important. I agree with 100%. Nobody has a book that's already written that says, here, just do the exact same step for your particular life and your particular passion. So it's this really dance that you have with the universe, and trust is part of it. Is I'm going to do the work, and I'm just going to trust that the doors are in front of me. They'll just open for me as I'm doing the work. So I think that's key. And
when they do open, you'll be ready. Like you'll be prepared to like, you get an opportunity, finally something good happens and you're good at your craft, or you're good enough to actually do something. So yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much for spending the morning with us. We really enjoyed learning the story and getting inspired by your story.
Oh, thanks, Dan.
Thank you.